Hello and welcome to Racing Game Rambles, a podcast where we ramble incessantly about racing games. I'm Martin and I'm joined by Kevin.
Hello.
So in our last episode, we discussed our most anticipated racing games of 2021, most of which probably won't be released in 2021, but that's besides the point. There'll be lots of delays, unfortunately. But one of them was released last month. We're talking about Destruction AllStars. Really, this is the first major first-party game for PlayStation 5, so there's been a fair amount of hype for it. Originally, it was going to be released as a full-price game, but it came out last month as a free-to-play game on PlayStation Plus instead, so it has obviously changed our expectations accordingly. Just to give you some background, it's a combat racer in the style of, I'd say, Destruction Derby with a bit of Twisted Metal, Rocket League, games like that. You can't get the impression of being a free-to-play plus game. Sony really wants it to be almost like the next Rocket League. But I have to say, from what I've played so far, I would say it's fun for about 5 minutes. Would you agree with that, Kevin?
Yeah, it's pretty shallow, isn't it, of an experience? I mean, like you said, it was going to be a £70 title.
Yeah.
And there's not even half of that amount of game here, you know. So they did the right thing putting it on PlayStation Plus. And it could be a very different game in 12 months' time, assuming they're going to continue to develop it. But as of now, it's very bare bones, isn't it?
Yes. No, I completely agree, yes. I always wonder if they changed the amount of content in the game before it was released as a free-to-play game, because there's no way it could have been released as a £70 game with this amount of content. I mean, at the time of recording, there's only 3 online modes and a very, very bare-bones single-player campaign, which we'll get to later. But yeah, I really can't imagine it being released as a £70 game at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, isn't it? They could have held back some content to put to their roadmap as they continue to develop the title. And as you say, there's just not enough content here. And it's what is here is very shallow, and it's very much a pick up and play game that you probably get maybe 30 minutes out of, and that'll be it.
Yeah.
You know, you'll be bored and you want something new. So I think to kick off with, I think Destruction AllStars has potential, but at the moment it's underwhelming. I mean, visually it looks fantastic. Technically, it works most of the time. There are some issues we had when we had a session recently, and there was a lot of issues regards connecting.
Yeah, we did
get
disconnected quite a few times, I seem to remember.
Yeah. So there's quite a few teething problems. And also there are some bugs as well when you're driving around. Sometimes you can get your vehicle stuck on odd angles and such. So there definitely is some rough edges. I mean, it's ambition. You know, I think this will be a much better title in the future. I think it's sort of launched probably in a non-finished state. Like you said, they could have held some content back because there's only a few modes there. And you know, there's only like 3 arenas in the main sort of game modes if you discount the Gridfall one, which has its own arena, but it's not really a proper arena as such.
Yeah.
So there's very few arenas there, and I don't know, I think they just got the balance wrong. I feel like there's too many characters and there's not enough arenas right now. I think if it was the other way around, it wouldn't be so bad. But it's an odd game, isn't it? It's an odd sort of mess of a game.
Mm-hmm.
That it can be fun, but equally it can be very frustrating as well, depending on what actually happens from game to game. And games do vary an awful lot, don't they? You can get some games where it's incredibly fun, you're crashing every 5 seconds, and other games you're sort of almost like seeking out an enemy. And even in the sort of free-for-all mode, sometimes you're driving around aimlessly, almost trying to get your next crash. So it really does depend on sort of, I guess, maybe the arena you're playing at, and also the players that are connected, and how much they actually want to go out their way and crash into you to earn the points. But it's very much a mixed bag.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it is fun. I would say it's fun to play in short bursts at the moment. It does offer some kind of mindless mayhem if that's what you're in the mood for. You know, there's nothing wrong with that in some senses. It's sometimes that's just what you want. You just want to have again, you can pick up and play for half an hour. And that's it. But I question as to if it has enough depth to really keep me hooked for much longer than that. That's the problem. You're obviously a big Rocket League fan, and that's a great example of a game where you can just play it for 5 minutes or 5 hours. You can get just as much fun out of it.
I think a big part of that is the sort of ongoing quest for improvement, because you have different tiers and divisions in Rocket League. So you got the main sort of tiers, of which I think there's 4, or was it 3 per tier? So you got 4 or 5 main tiers. Within those tiers, there's 3 sub tiers, if you like, and within those sub tiers, there's actually, I think, 3 divisions as well. So often the hook in Rocket League is trying to get yourself promoted. So that takes quite a lot of play time to do that, because you're not going to get promoted instantly if you win a game or two. You know, it takes several wins and stuff. So you constantly, you have that hook to come back and keep playing and improving and improving and improving. Whereas in Destruction AllStars, there's no ranked games. There's no divisions or tiers in place where you can sort of aim for that promotion to improve. So right now it's like everyone is lumped into the same game. So you've got a pretty obvious range of skill in there. So you have top players that know the game very well and getting the best out of it. Equally, you have those that don't have a clue and end up crashing into their own teammates because it's not apparently clear what they should be doing, which sort of brings us on to the tutorials, which, although they're lengthy, I find that they don't explain some of the core elements very well at all. And it leads to a lot of trial and error when you're playing the game as to what you're supposed to be doing to contribute to your team in a good way, you know?
No. When I played the tutorial, I didn't, like you said, I didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing when I went online, and I felt like I was sort of being pushed into the deep end quite a bit. So at the moment, I think I said earlier, there's 3 game modes. I meant to say there's actually 4 game modes and only 3 arenas. You've got Mayhem, which is basically your kind of free-for-all, old-school demolition derby mode. For me, this is probably the mode I play the most. It does kind of scratch that itch a bit for a kind of modern Destruction Derby remake to a degree. But it's just not much depth to it. It's just a case of you just go around smashing into other players, and that's really it. There's not a lot to the game.
It's interesting because even Destruction Derby, if you remember, had different leagues as well. And you know, and so you're battling for promotion again in those leagues. You had 4 players, or AI, including yourself, in each division. I think there's 4 divisions in total in Destruction Derby. And I remember the roof. Was it the roof? I think it was the roofs of the cars corresponded to the division they were in as well. So you
the original Destruction Derby game.
The original Destruction Derby. Yeah, you had the roof denoted the division they were in. I think the white roof was Division 4. I think it might have been a black roof of 1 and a red one and something else, maybe yellow or something. But you had that, even though it was single player, you still had that aim complete to get forward, which is an interesting parallel actually to Rocket League, and something that's absent, like we said, in Destruction AllStars. But I loved the original Destruction Derby on the PS1. It was phenomenal. I remember first playing it on the PC, and I was like, wow, I've got to get this on the PlayStation. It's amazing. And to this day, I guess the closest we've got is Wreckfest. I guess I was kind of hoping that Destruction AllStars would be a bit more like Destruction Derby.
What's interesting, originally the developers have recently said that it was originally going to be a Destruction Derby sequel, which I would have loved that.
Which is nonsense, really, isn't it? Because there's nothing like it, really. I mean, like you say, the closest you're going to get is the Mayhem mode.
Yes.
Is the free-for-all.
Did you ever play Destruction Derby Arenas on PlayStation 2?
Only for a brief period. I didn't get into it now.
So I do feel like this game is very much like a spiritual successor to that. It does have a surprising amount in common with that game. I don't think a lot of people really played this one. Technically, it was the last ever official Destruction Derby game in the series, but it didn't quite get the recognition of especially the first 2 games on PlayStation 1. I said the first 3 games had a really gritty style to it. It was semi-realistic. But Destruction Derby Arenas had a very similar art style, I would say, to Destruction AllStars. It was very colourful, very bright, much more cartoony, and less emphasis on realism. There's also the fact that Destruction Derby Arenas was also designed to showcase the PlayStation 2's online multiplayer. Back in the day when you had to buy a separate adapter and connect it to the back of your PlayStation 2. Do you remember that?
Yes, that was awkward, wasn't it? I never actually had that because I was, when the Xbox 360 came out, and that was, to me, that was the primary online console for me years ago. It just seemed too awkward on the PS2 to
Yeah, I think later PlayStation models had it built in, but if you had the first original model, you had to buy an adapter and attach it to the back, which I've still got somewhere. I mean, it's technically the first online driving game I think I ever played, so that really appealed to me at the time. But it was a big push for Sony's online multiplayer at the time. There's other things too, like the arena design. They've got loads of obstacles to dodge. That's also in Destruction AllStars. Even stuff like the commentators, to me again, really feels like a homage to Destruction Derby Arenas. I don't know if this was deliberate or not. I don't know for sure if any of the original developers worked on Destruction AllStars as well, but it really feels like it, to be honest. Because the team is made up of former developers from all sorts of veteran racing game developers. I believe some were from Bizarre Creations. They worked on Project Gotham. I think there's some from Evolution. There's a lot of racing game talent that went into this, so I'm really hoping for more.
Yeah,
I'd have been happier if it was a full-fledged game, if it had enough, if it had more content to it. In its current state, it just feels so shallow and so bare bones. It's such a shame. Other modes in the game include, remind me.
Oh yeah, so we have Gridfall, which is everyone starts with one life, and you knock people into the sort of pit, and gradually pieces of the surface sort of fall away, and you have several pits established, and it can get quite chaotic. But the problem with this particular game is once you do lose all your lives, you're sort of booted back out of the game into the sort of scorecard, and it's just not satisfying enough. I would like to see who actually wins this event.
You can't even spectate the matches, can you?
It's crazy.
That happens a lot in Wreckfest. You can get completely wrecked and you don't finish the race, but you do at least get to spectate and watch the rest of the race. But for some reason,
it reminded me of the anticlimactic feeling when you finish a race in Assetto Corsa and there's no fanfare whatsoever. You just
that's right.
Get the scorecard thing, and that's it. The times, and that's it.
I mean, this particular game type, it's over far too quickly sometimes.
I mean, for a game, Destruction AllStars has so much fanfare before you start a game mode. You see the characters running off the platform, jumping.
I quite like that.
Yeah, it's very well done. But there's nothing after Gridfall.
No.
It's amazing. They have all this effort before the game starts. They should have something post game. The option to spectate or enjoy it. The rest of the thing.
It must have been the scene where they all run to their car at the start. It reminds me of those like old Le Mans races where you had to run to the car. Modern take on it, yeah. Yeah, but it doesn't. It kind of just falls flat after that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, there is depth in this game. We're not saying it's completely lack of depth, because there are different approaches you can use to score. Like, for example, you could pick up all the shards, I think they call them. And you can sort of boost up your character and also your hero car, and that enables you to do more damage. Each hero car has its own special effects, so you can jump in those once it's powered up, and you can really do some serious damage. But the thing I find frustrating is even when you are in your hero car, you can still take massive damage. So sometimes you're building up points. You've got maybe 200 health left on your car, which is a fair amount. I think you get about 260 or so to start with. And sometimes one crash and you're ended.
Yeah,
so
it's like so
frustrating.
Yeah,
I should feel like a complete badass in my hero car.
So you want to feel like you've been rewarded, don't you?
Yeah. Sometimes I just get wiped out too quickly, and I think, wow. And I've got to build it up again now. Do I build it up by crashing into cars, or do I collect the shards on foot?
Yeah.
Normally I just go for the shards way because I find it builds up a lot quicker doing it that way. But of course you're vulnerable on foot, so you could get knocked out or whatever.
I would say there is an element of strategy in that sense, but there's still not an awful lot of depth. It basically just amounts to selecting the right character, because all the characters have different hero cars, and some of them are way overpowered compared to others. I mean, I usually just go for the Tiger one, for example, because you can get the hero car with the massive buzzsaw on the front that just splits up the cars in half. That's really satisfying. But there's others you can have that don't really inflict much damage at all, which is surprising. I do feel like there are some balance issues there, definitely.
Yeah, I guess these things are going to be expected. You need a lot of players playing the game before you sort of really sort out the balancing issues. So I guess it's always going to be a teething problem. But I know what you're saying. It does seem that some vehicles are really good and some are almost useless. But I don't know. It's a lot of characters. There's 16 characters. Each has its own car and special effects on foot. So there's a lot there to experiment with. I just feel that there's too many, it's too complicated in a sense.
Yeah.
A bit like Onrush in a way, because I think Onrush probably would have benefited from simplifying all their systems, because a lot of players, when they got on there, especially at launch, just absolutely clueless, didn't know what to do to contribute to the team score. And I feel like the same thing's happening here with All-Stars. And maybe less is more in this situation in terms of different characters, different abilities and stuff. It's a lot to take in. And as we said earlier, the tutorials don't really do a great job of explaining each character. And you're really sort of left to your own devices in the deep end there. So there's lots of things they can do to improve that there.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, kind of mixed feelings so far, to be honest, on the game. I think there is potential for it to improve over time, but it really needs to make a good impression from the start. And people's attention spans are so short these days, they just move on to the next game. And I do feel like this game could suffer a similar fate to Onrush and just be abandoned pretty early on. At the moment, it's got a good ready-made fan base because obviously it's free to play on PlayStation Plus. But it'll be very interesting to see in a few months' time if those players stick with the game and if more players jump on when you actually have to pay for it. Interesting, I did read an update that they've updated the price details now. So when it goes out to PlayStation Plus, it's going to be, I believe it said $20.
Yeah. I have read that somewhere. 20. I mean, 20 is about where it should be. In my opinion.
I can't go over. They're going to sell this for £70.
Yeah.
An unknown IP like this would have been such a risky move.
They need so many more modes, don't they? They need. Just need to keep, developing the game, keep adding more and more. At the moment, it's very much a case of playing it for a bit and putting it down and coming back to it maybe a week later, seeing what's new. And they did have an update recently, but it doesn't seem to have added an awful lot.
No, I read that. It didn't say anything about adding more modes or anything like that.
I know they had some challenge system added, which is much like Rocket League has as well. So I imagine they're taking a lot of cues from Rocket League, but they need to add more arenas, more game modes. They need people. Like, for example, we joined a party and we couldn't go into the free-for-all modes, the two solo modes.
Mayhem, no. I think they are changing that. In the latest update, they did say that you can play Mayhem as a party.
Okay.
It says there's going to be featured playlists, including Mayhem 8 versus 8, and it has a note saying playable in a party. So I think a lot of people probably complained about that. But it's not quite clear if that means it's going to be playable with a party in all Mayhem modes or just this specific playlist, because they only mentioned this in March. Yeah, that's a little bit confusing, to be honest. But looking ahead, they haven't mentioned any new game modes, new cars or characters or anything like that. So I do question the direction the game's going to go. At this point, it does technically have a single player campaign as well, but you have to pay for it to unlock some of it, which is surprising.
Which is crazy.
I think that's clearly something they've added when the game was changed to a free-to-play PlayStation Plus game, I'd imagine. I mean, from what I played there, they weren't very engaging at all. It was just it was mini challenges, basically, collecting so many items on the track, destroy a specific amount of opponents, that kind of thing.
One thing I will say on the single player parts, I did find the crashing to be much more satisfying. Yes. It seemed like the AI was very well tuned to having good pile-ups and stuff. So, and you get those nice slow-mos, didn't you? Which sort of gives you that burnout feeling. So there's some nice effects going on there. It'd be nice to see them expand the single-player mode and make it worthwhile.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
It certainly has potential with the slow-mos and the crash effects and stuff. There's some nice visual effects in this game. There really is.
Yeah. I mean, the clues in the title, there is. I am impressed with the destruction overall, I would say. Yeah, the cars do crumple convincingly. And they do actually deform. When you compare it to obviously the first Destruction Derby game, it does show how far we've come with that. It's still not quite on the level of Wreckfest, I would say, but overall, I'm quite pleased with the carnage. Lots of parts fly off. There's lots of debris that scatters on the track. Takedowns are really satisfying as well, like you said, with the slow motion. I do really enjoy that, but you don't quite get the same feeling of satisfaction online somehow without that. No. I don't think. You don't really get to see the car that you've wrecked sort of flying in the air around you.
I had a game recently and there was a bit of lag involved. So even a little bit of lag, you lose all that satisfaction of the crash because it sort of, you have that delay and it's like, oh, God. So there are some technical issues with the game that need to be ironed out. And they will get ironed out, I'm sure, in due course. But I guess this game lives and dies on how much they can add to it, because at the moment the skeleton is there, but that's all it is. There's no meat on those bones that we need to keep us coming back. So there's a lot of work for the developer to do, even though they do have the pedigree, as you say. They come from amazing game series, and this game should be better considering the talent they have involved. I guess we didn't expect a phenomenal game, let's say, because it wasn't showing a lot of gameplay initially, were they? No. So we knew something was up with this game.
No, so he didn't do the best job of marketing it, to be honest. It was kind of shown in the PlayStation 5 reveal, and then really next to nothing was shown in the game until a few weeks before it launched. So I can't imagine what the pre-order numbers must have been like when it was when it was a retail game, a full price game.
That's probably one of the biggest reasons why they chose PS Plus.
That was the right thing to do in the end, I think. But the game that we got in the end, I question if it's actually better than what we would have had if it was a full price game.
It still has a chance, doesn't it? We there's not many races out for the PS5. We have WRC. That's about it, really. It's there's one or two other little games that. But there are a few free-to-play titles on the system currently, but in terms of racing, it's they're basically all on their own there, free-to-play stuff. If you discount Rocket League, because it's not really a racer, is it? But
well, technically, there's no actual racing in this game, which I must admit, I do wish there was some traditional track racing in it as well. With that damaged model and that focus on destruction, that it really could have been a kind of modern-day Destruction derby.
Yeah, it's very much a product of now, isn't it? Destruction AllStars. This couldn't have existed in its format, like with the sort of the obnoxious, colourful characters and the sort of very short attention span game experience.
Yeah, are we just too old for this game?
Well, this is it. We're not the target audience, perhaps, and it
feels like it.
Yeah, it seems like it was very much of the mobile generation, like the youngsters.
But all the same with mobile games, they're designed in a way to keep you hooked and playing as long as possible. I'm not getting that with Destruction AllStars as much.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite simplistic, isn't it? But I don't know, there's not enough there to keep coming back at the moment. That's the problem. So if they're looking for people to spend money on items, maybe it's a bit of a tough sell at the moment. Whereas Rocket League done so much right, to hook me in as well, even at my age, in the 30s, I'm obsessed with this game, and it's really captured me, and like nothing has this generation. So or last generation, I should say. So there's plenty of cues they could take from Rocket League if they want to be successful, and it looks like they're already starting with these challenges that they've added to the game, which are very, it's a very basic system. It's not very exciting, but it's something there that Rocket League has, and I imagine they'll be adding more and more game modes and stuff. But we don't need any more cars at the moment. We don't need any more characters. No. Give us some game modes. Give us some interesting arenas, and give us like arenas that really lend itself to crashing. Yeah. Just a simple circular dome, something like that. Because Gridfall is not really a crashing, bashing mode as such. You sort of there's a lot of driving around and there's not.
I think the arenas they're a bit too big sometimes for the amount of players in each match. There's currently a cap of 16 players per match, but there are quite a lot.
That's double.
Yes, you would kind of expect that, wouldn't you, for a next generation title?
You would indeed, and like you say, they're too big for the 16 player limit.
There's too many moments of just driving around, just looking for someone to smash into.
And if you're tailing someone, because they're circular maps, you can just sort of drive on forever, and you'll be forever tailing someone and not ever crash into them.
There's only 3 arenas in this game. I don't know about you, but I find it very difficult to tell apart.
Yeah, exactly. That compounds
the same.
3 arenas, and yet they're so alike, and you'd be hard pressed at any moment to tell whether you're in London or Tokyo. I think it is one of them. It's
I think it's London, Tokyo, and Spain. I think it is.
See, I didn't even realise Spain existed because they're all so similar.
Yeah.
There certainly needs to be some originality to the circuits. Make each one special. Make it localized to the place it's supposed to be. Give us more obvious cues that we're in London or we're in Spain.
I think the London Eye's in it in the background if you look hard enough.
Yeah, but you have to look harder. That's the problem, isn't it? It'd be nice to have something on the track itself, or something. It all seems a little bit.
Yeah, I thought there'd be
bland.
more kind of traps and obstacles to avoid as well. That would really add to it. I mean, there's one track where there's these kind of fans you can drive through that are rotating. If you get caught by it, you get split in half. That's quite fun to drive through. But some players, you can also set traps, but it doesn't feel like you get the opportunity to do that very often. And they don't seem to be very effective either a lot of the time, which I think comes back to the game's balancing issues.
Yeah, and like setting traps, I wouldn't even know how to do that.
No, because the tutorial gave no explanation to it, I don't think.
And I'm probably approaching level 30 now, so I've put a few hours in, and yet it's all the systems there are not apparently obvious to me. So it needs to be done a lot better.
Yeah.
But yeah, just give us some arena. I mean, look at Wreckfest is a good example that has arenas that are set up for destruction. They're so well done. They're so simple, but it's the simplicity that makes them brilliant, because it just lends itself to crashing so often.
Yes.
And that's where I feel Destruction AllStars is lacking. The arenas are not really set up for crashing. My favorite mode is Carnado. Carnado it's called. I'm going to say Sharknado there for a second.
I keep calling it Carmageddon as well, but no, that's not it.
Different game.
Game.
It's in the middle, and you don't want the thing in the middle, because that's the part where you're going to get all the cars together and smash into each other. So it's almost like you're driving around the tornado to get crashes and stuff, and around the outer of the level, and it's just, I don't know, there seems to be the shapes of the tracks, of the environments, that just don't lend themselves to crashing very well. So it's called Destruction AllStars, but it's missing the destruction because there's not enough of it going on throughout a game, which can be frustrating. Even on the free-for-alls, I feel there's a basic lack of smashing. So
I would say I enjoy the game more when I'm driving than I am on foot. And that is something I will admit that does make Destruction AllStars stand out.
Yeah.
You can get out of your car at any point. The game's designed to make you switch to different vehicles as often as possible to keep you in the action. It does a reasonably good job of that, I would say.
Yeah, it does.
I like how you can just eject out of the car when it's about to be destroyed and then just hop into another one instantly. For some reason, it reminds me of driving San Francisco shift mode, just constantly switching between different cars.
Just have to get that in, just to shoehorn that in.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, there's not always a car available when you do sort of eject. So you try to drive to one if possible, and then you can eject and then actually land on top of the one.
Yeah, I do find that quite fun.
Go inside. So that's very well done. Yeah, and the hero vehicles as well. They're normally not too far away from you as well. So there's designated spots and these platforms that are sort of come out of the ground with the vehicle on tow. So it's very well done. I must admit that is very well done, and it does keep the action going. It's just a shame that the action itself lacks depth, or at least it lacks a ranking system that would encourage a player to keep playing, to rank up and have an ultimate goal, because it's just like a one and done deal. You play the game, then you satisfy the game's thing just for that one game, and there's no win tally chart or anything like that. You're playing with random people each time. So you don't even play with the same
group. Isn't it? Yeah, when you finish a match, rather than keep you with the same players, it asks you to matchmake again, and it puts you with different players each time. Again, that makes it really hard to get invested in the game.
Yeah, exactly. It's that disconnect, isn't it? It's just one and done. It's like, wouldn't it be nice if they actually ordered the teams based on the scoring from the previous game, where you could try and balance out the teams, because there's no rank system.
Or have a best of 3, for example, or
even a best of 3 would add so much, wouldn't it? Something as simple as that.
The matches only last about I think it's 5 to 7 minutes, something like that. Because in Rocket League, it keeps you with the same player base at all times, right?
I guess it depends on the mode. If you're playing ranked, there is a chance.
It's been a long time since I played Rocket League, I'll be honest.
Yeah. There is a chance that you can play with the same players again, certainly. But you're not guaranteed, that's for sure. But there is definitely a chance of that, and it's nice when it happens, and it's nice to party up with random people as well, because it's such a good team game where the goal is so obvious, like you hit the ball, and it's it's the simplicity which works for Rocket League, whereas Destruction AllStars, in some ways, is so complex in terms of the different vehicles and effects on foot and such, it complicates things. Where you just feel like if they dial it back a bit and just make it more focused, I feel that it'd be better. Because at the moment, I don't believe everyone knows what they're doing.
No.
You see the scoreboard at the end of games. You see a lot of players on 0 points. So a ranked system would add a lot to that, because not only do you have a goal to get better, you are going to be playing with equally skilled players. So you have that closeness of the game result. Every game is going to be competitive, and you can learn together from the same sort of skill level. So I feel that, like you say, even like a best of 3 or a ranked mode would add so much replayability to this game, which currently has very little.
I think it'd be more fun too if you didn't feel so defenseless when you're on foot. Like if you could pick up some more weapons, and that would add some more strategy to it as well. Because I do feel quite vulnerable when on foot, and there's so many times where I feel like I'm just stranded and just running aimlessly trying to find another car. A lot of time is wasted doing that, and that's just not very fun. You can get abilities, but they're never really very strong. They don't really have much impact on the match. Like you can be invisible, for example. I think it would be more effective if you could actually attack other players on foot.
Oh, there is a system in place where you can actually attack other on foot players if you're on foot yourself.
I mean, like destroy other cars. You can punch people, can't you, on foot? Yeah. But
you can.
I want to pick up a rocket launcher and just blast someone, for example.
I know what you're saying, but there is a system there where you can jump on top of a rival vehicle.
Yes, that's true. Yes,
and either destroy it or overtake it. But it's not very well explained, and you're sort of button mashing, and it's like, how do I do this again? You're wiggling the joystick, or you're mashing square and circle, and depending on what end of the thing you're on. But I don't know. There's, as I say, there's players there that know an awful lot about the game. There's some that know next to nothing, and they're all sort of smashed into the same game. It's a bit of a mess right now. So you will get games. I mean, I had a game the other day that was, I think the points were in maybe the 500s, and our team won by 1 point. But that's the only time it's ever been really close. Normally you have skewed results. If someone leaves the game, you're really at a disadvantage there. Whereas in Rocket League, if it's the non-ranked play game and someone leaves, you get an AI come in and replace them. This game doesn't have that, so you're very much you've got very little chance to win that way. And I do see games that end with maybe 7 or 8 players one side and maybe 4 players on the other side. So it does happen. So there are a few things that I need to add, and AI bots, best of 3, ranked.
I think even adding just music to the matches might improve the game as well.
That's another thing.
There's no atmosphere at all. It's surprisingly sterile for a game where everyone's crashing into each other. You've got like really rousing intro where the player jumps off the platform, dives into the car, but there's just
crowd cheering and then silence. Sort of like, there's no music. It's unbelievable. I mean, what game was it that didn't have any? I think it was it Dirt? Not Dirt. No, it was Grid. The new Grid game has, as far as I know, had no background music at all. And it's like, how can you release an arcade racer with no background music? It's unthinkable to me. That would really add to the.
Yeah, that would really add.
Imagine Burnout Paradise without its soundtrack. It wouldn't be the same game, would it?
No, but then that game has better sound design overall, though. The crash sound effects, the crunching metal.
But you need that music. Yeah.
Yes, it does. It all adds to it. But it's also it's supposed to be like this big spectacle, this big stadium, but it just doesn't feel like it doesn't have that atmosphere. There's not really any crowd noise. I think there is a bit, but it's very, very muted. Just small touches like that would make such a big difference, I think, to this game. But I think it's still one to watch. It could still improve over time with patches and updates. For now, it feels like a case of style over substance, I would say. It's just too shallow. It's fun in short bursts if you're in the mood for just a half an hour smashing fest. Yeah, I think we'll have to wait and see. There are alternatives, of course, if you're in the mood for some destruction. Obviously, we mentioned Wreckfest, which recently had an update with a new track and tournament, and also a new car pack. So this is called Wrecknado. It adds a new track with a very unique design, I must say. It's got these banked corners that all meet into a central almost arena. Lots of opportunities for crashes there, I have to say. I have tried it. and it is utter mayhem online. It's the exact opposite to Destruction AllStars. It's never a dull moment. There's up to 24 cars on screen as well. You have to commend Bugbear though. Wreckfest is just the game that keeps on giving. The amount of updates they've added to this game. Wreckfest came out a year and a half ago, and they're still releasing regular updates. They're still adding more tracks. They're still improving the game. Yeah, they've done a commendable job updating the game. Have you had a chance to try out Wrecknado yet? It's a lot of fun.
Not yet. I did see the trailer. I've seen a video of the impressions as well. So I've had a good look at the track, and yeah, it's just typical Wreckfest, isn't it? Their level design is fantastic because everything is geared to get cars colliding together, and so you don't have a dull moment or very fleeting moments perhaps where you don't have crashes. But they keep things simple, don't they, Wreckfest? And as a result, it gives you more. So less is more when it comes to arenas, it seems, in order to keep the action ticking over. Whereas Destruction AllStars, like we said, it's probably too big.
Too large.
There's not that central zone like you have in this recent Wreckfest update.
It's a great mix, I think, of a racetrack and an arena. It all just meets in the middle. You can choose your path as well. You can go left or right on each bank turn. So
yeah, and the bank turns are giving you that speed as well going in. So everything is thought out beautifully, and it's sort of its simplicity is. I mean, there's a complexity there in the sense that the thought process behind it, but ultimately it's a sort of simplistic way of gearing cars head-on collisions, getting them to drive into each other, and sometimes less is more, and every sort of Wreckfest track I see it seems to work, doesn't it? To get some good action. So it has that wonderful damage model, of course, which is the best. So fantastic track design, fantastic damage model. We just want a PS5 patch now.
I was about to say that. Yeah, just need a PS5 update. But saying that, the game still runs very smoothly on PS5. Unfortunately, it's not 60 frames, but it does run slightly better than the PS4. And also the load times are much shorter, thankfully. Well, that's one of my main criticisms of the game on PS4, which is the loading times, but it's worth the wait. Actually, there's another random Destruction game available on PlayStation 5, which I believe you played recently as well. Concept Destruction. This was a surprise game.
Yes.
So this is an indie game that was released on initially PS4, and I think, is it on PC? And of all the games, it actually had a PS5 update recently. Very surprising. Wreckfest doesn't have one yet, but this little-known indie racer did get one. Interesting, just like Destruction AllStars, it's only based in arenas. There's no actual track racing. What makes this game unique is that all the cars are made out of cardboard. Yes. It sounds ridiculous, but it works. The physics are actually surprisingly in-depth, I'd say. The cars actually deform as you'd expect them to if they were made out of cardboard. It's a fun little game. I do recommend it. The frame rate isn't very well optimized on PlayStation 5, though, surprisingly. I think you had this problem as well,
it tanks big time, doesn't it? Probably the worst frame rate I've ever seen. Or for years anyway. It's a very sort of wonky game. It's almost like it's part of its charm having that frame rate dip, because it sacrifices frame rate for chaos.
Yeah.
So you have it's like about 50 vehicles or so. There's tons of vehicles in these arenas, and like you say, the deformation on the cardboard is fantastic. It's such a fun game, and it kind of reminds me of Wreckfest, because sometimes you could end up with a car with sort of half caved in, and it's still sort of rolling along. So it has that charm about it, and something so simple is going to be good as long as the physics are good, which they are. So it does make the game a lot of fun. It's just a shame that the frame rate is terrible on it, but it's just a few pounds and it's a bit of fun. You just want to mess about for a little bit. So I hope they can update the game on the PS5 to give us a true PS5 update with decent frame rate. Good game, good fun, and the deformation is fantastic.
The deformation is surprisingly advanced for such a small indie game like this. It only costs, I think, was it about, how much do you pay for it on PlayStation 5? It's about £2.
Yeah, it was on sale. It was £2 or something crazy. I mean, imagine what they could do with this with a bit of funding, with these sort of physics underpinnings. It could be amazing, couldn't it, in the future, if this developer can get some funding.
I mean, there's not a lot of content in this game. We should point that out. But for what you're paying, that's fine. I remember I finished the whole campaign in a Sunday afternoon.
Oh, really?
I even got the platinum trophy on the same Sunday afternoon. That's how easy this game is to complete. But
it's like they started developing a racing game, and they started with the most important thing, which is the physics and the deformation, and then they thought, oh, we've got something tangible here. Let's put out a tech demo stroke game to showcase what we have, and hopefully they can work on something. Make a game around those physics, because those physics are very good.
Highly recommend that game though for such a small price. You can't go wrong with that. But yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot of PlayStation 5 racing games coming out at the moment, it seems. But we've had Destruction AllStars in February. In our last episode, we previewed some of the titles coming out in the future, but they didn't have any set release dates. One game we were obviously hoping would come out this year was Gran Turismo 7. It's been delayed until 2022. What a surprise. I don't think this news came as a surprise to anyone who's followed the Gran Turismo series for the last 20 years. Have they ever released the game on time?
I think the second game was the only one they released.
Right.
I think it only took about a year or so after the first. It was very fast, like totally not what you'd expect from
99 that came out, and the first one was 97.
Yeah, 2 years, which is like a blink of an eye for Polyphony.
GT3 was 2 years later as well, but then after that,
that's true. Actually, that's true. So I guess it started with GT4.
Yes.
But even then, you could argue there was like concept game, wasn't there? There was a sort of prologue as well, and
prologues.
Geneva game, and so there's filled in the gaps, except for recent times we had GT6 and then nothing for ages, and Sport nothing for ages, and GT7 hopefully sometime next year now, 22. We wasn't surprised. We said at the time they're back to their old tricks again, and it's a shame, but it does raise the question: will it have full PSVR 2 support?
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that this is announced on the same day that PSVR 2 was announced. I really think it's going to be a showcase title for PSVR 2. Hopefully a release will coincide with the new headset as well, because, I said before, racing games are the perfect showcase of VR technology. You're in a fixed cockpit. There's less risk of motion sickness, and it really does transform the experience and adds to the immersion. Potentially there's a lot to be excited about there, but I really think that it's not a coincidence that both the GT7 delay and the PSVR 2 were announced on the same day. So the GT Sport had VR compatibility, but it was very limited. There's so much potential for it, but it was restricted to, you could only race one other car, I believe.
And I don't know, the physics for me didn't feel right in GT Sport with the VR mode. I just felt that there wasn't enough depth there.
I think it was simplified a bit because of the limitations of the technology, But I think what they could do with PSVR 2, though.
Yeah, that would be something. I'm a major VR fan, so I was very surprised at the news that the PSVR 2 was announced. We don't know the price, we don't know the specs.
No, they've not really said much.
We don't know when it's coming.
No,
but it exists, and the fact that they acknowledged it exists surprised me.
No, this is the first time it's been confirmed in development.
Yeah. Who's got a PS5? Nobody. So
we do somehow.
To ask people to potentially buy a very expensive add-on for a console that they might have only just got or haven't got yet is a big ask for the consumer.
Yeah.
So I'm very surprised that they did this, but I'm very happy because I feel that they probably took too long last gen to bring out PSVR, and it appears that they want to bring it out slightly earlier compared to last gen, and I'll be all for that as long as it's a true sort of evolution or revolution, I should say, in VR for console games. It could be amazing. They did mention it as a wire, so that does say to me that they're going for power, aren't they, rather than convenience, which is not a bad thing because the Quest really has that convenience thing down at the moment. The price is cheap, it's transportable, so why not go with the wire and go for power?
I can live with that. I can live with just one wire
factor.
I can live with just one wire when you compare it to the current PSVR, which is just a trail of wires all over the floor. It's an absolute mess.
Terrible, isn't it?
So I don't use PSVR that often for that reason because it's such a hassle to set up every time. We've got the processing box as well. There's like 4 different connections for that alone. It's not the most convenient device, that's for sure. So I'm glad they've streamlined that for the second one.
It's going to be clunky, but less clunky, I think, PSVR 2. I'm okay with that. I can live with that because what that will do is it will utilize the power of the PS5. It's not a standalone headset that you charge up maybe every few, you might only get a few hours battery life if it was standalone. That's the problem. So I'm kind of happy it's wired because it gives you the infinite battery life and it gives you the power of the PS5. So we should make for some truly amazing experiences. Like we say, we want GT7 fully playable in PSVR 2. That'd be amazing.
And they're also developing a bespoke controller for it this time, unlike before where it used the age-old PlayStation Move controllers from the PlayStation 3 era.
3 era, yeah, exactly. That's a big thing, the lack of thumbsticks on the moves. So yeah, that alone will revolutionize console VR on the PlayStation without a doubt. That is one of the biggest things. You know, if you're playing a game like Borderlands 2 VR, you're pressing buttons to turn, and it takes hours and hours to get used to certain control schemes. There's no standardization of the control scheme, so each game you play could have a different control scheme. So you need to standardize that control across all VR, and I feel like a designated VR controller can do that.
Yes,
or certainly will help in that process. And Sony should really say to developers, you know, we would like it if you stuck to these set of controls, you know, and then you have that standardization, and then with that you won't have players having to keep learning different control schemes. So less of an issue with a racing game for using a wheel, of course, but you know,
it's just also the fact the Move controllers were so outdated as well. You could really tell they were from the PS3 era. So many games I played had tracking issues all the time. So I'm relieved that they are at least adding a new controller for it. I think that will be a big step up. Obviously, you can expect a higher resolution as well.
They spoke about a higher field of view as well, which was important. I believe that the original had, I think it was 90 degrees, something like that, around the 100. Some headsets do well over 100 degrees, so it just gives you that a little bit more immersion as well. So expect all these little improvements across the board, really. So yeah, it'd be very exciting to see what they have there. Because Wipeout is like amazing, isn't it? On the PlayStation
if you
VR.
can stomach it.
Yeah, and you know, just imagine what they're going to be like in the future. These racing games is going to be phenomenal. And you know, it is the future, in my opinion. It's just how long it's going to take to catch on, I don't know, but we'll get there eventually when it stops making people feel sick.
That's really exciting, but I think we're just going to have to be patient at the moment because thanks to COVID, a lot of games are going to be delayed. GT7 is not going to be the last one.
I'm thinking 2022 or possibly 2023 is going to be one hell of a year for games.
I mean, yeah, we'll have to wait and see then if the other racing games we talked about in the last episode will see a delay. The Need for Speed could still come out later this year. We'll have to wait and see. But other than that, there's not really many major titles apart from the obvious WRC sequels, a new F1 game. Forza, like we said last time, we still don't know when that's been released, but it looked like it was very early in development. They revealed next to nothing about that game. So I'd be surprised if it came out next year, to be honest. But exciting times are ahead, but we're just going to have to be patient. We've got Destruction AllStars to keep us going, at least. Can you see yourself putting 5,000 hours into Destruction AllStars like you did with Rocket League?
No, although if I'm being honest, I don't think I could play any other game for 5,000 hours somehow. You know, this is why my backlog exists. Rocket League has really sorted everything up. So you know, I've got to. I mean, it's uninstalled currently. I'm trying to not play it and get through my backlog slowly. But it was lightning in a bottle, in my opinion. Rocket League. I don't think we'll see another game quite like it, unless a sequel comes out, of course. But I don't think anything could rival it in the racing, driving, combat sector. You know, I don't think anything could be as good as it. Quite frankly, I don't think Onrush captured it. I don't think Destruction AllStars is going to capture it either. So, truly lightning in the bottle, in my opinion.
So, just to sum up there, I guess, Destruction AllStars, it's fun to play in short bursts, but it just doesn't have the depth to keep you hooked, unfortunately. Future updates could improve that. But I think that's about it then for this podcast. Thanks again for listening. Thanks for joining me again, Kevin, as well.
No problem.
If you enjoyed it, do subscribe to the Wheelspin Gaming channel. And I'm hoping to put this onto other podcast platforms as well. Spotify, iTunes, etc. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again next time. Bye for now.